In this presentation, we're going to continue on to part 2 of setting up our inventory items within QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We're going to continue importing our inventory assets here. So we're going to go down below and we are going to go to the sales items. We're going to go to the products and services tab. And you'll note then down here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We should be having more now that we upload our inventory items. Last time we uploaded our service items. Now remember, when we do so, we're going to be using this Excel worksheet here. And just note that if you look at this Excel worksheet, we're also telling the system, hey, look, this is how much assets we have on hand. This is the quantity of assets we have on hand, which means that QuickBooks is going to have to put something on the balance sheet as well, inventory. Not in terms of quantity, but the quantity times the cost. So it needs the cost and the quantity. It's going to have to do some kind of journal entry then. So just keep that in mind. When you have the inventory, we can't just go in there and just debit inventory or increase inventory on the balance sheet, because then we won't have the supporting documentation if we want QuickBooks to track the supporting documentation. If we don't, if we want to track it in some other way, then we can do that process and not use QuickBooks to do the inventory tracking process. But if we want QuickBooks to track the inventory, we have to do this method to tell it what types of inventory we have, the cost of that inventory, and the quantity. And then we're going to need the sales price and all this other stuff so we can populate, of course, the invoice and sales receipt. So we have this now. This is what we're now going to upload. We're going to take this, we're going to upload it into the QuickBooks system, go through the similar process we did with the service items. Now note that I did delete the second tab. We only have one tab, right? We don't have two tabs because that'll confuse things. I don't want two tabs here. So I'm going to go back over here and we're going to go through the same similar kind of process we did last time. Note, again, you could, when you enter the inventory, say new and enter these items as inventory items up top, one at a time, and go through that data input screen, which would include the same data we did for each of one of these 6 items. Or you can take this and bulk upload it, which again, if you have multiple pieces of inventory, it might be faster, even if you're making the Excel worksheet from scratch, as we in essence did. So we're then going to select the drop down and import in this fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and import it then. Then we looked at the practice file. We're going to browse, of course, our computer to find the location that we want to find that Excel file in. And I have called this one inventory items. So that's the one we want. It's an Excel file called inventory items. I'm going to double click on it. It should be in there now. It'd be nice if it gave it some kind of indication that it's there, but it's uploaded, I believe. And then we're going to say next. And that'll kind of give us the indication that it's up there. So we have that same matching type of screen now. I'm going to open Excel back up. I'm going to open that document so we can see them and line them up in this screen. So here's our Excel document that we uploaded. Now here's our header screens. What the screen that we're on now is saying, it's saying, hey, here's all the headers that we have. Here's all the possible data input screens that you can use. We're mapping them to what you had on your Excel sheet. Is that mapping correct? That's the second step. So they call it the map data. So we're mapping the data out. Now let's line this up. So we got the SKU. If I go back over here and say, all right, the SKU, I'm just going to go ahead and highlight them. I'm going to say, all right, I see that one. I like to make it green. Green means it's good. It's okay. Yellow I have to go back to. And then we have the type. So we said the type, that lines up to the type. So we have the type. That's going to be the inventory type rather than the product. That's way over here. We put it in a different spot, but there's the type. So we have that. That's good. Then we have the sales description and sales description. So that's exactly what we had on our sheet. No ambiguity there. So we have the sales description. That looks good. Then we have the sales price. So they put sales price / rate. We just put sales price, but they were able to map that out. They were able to line that up. So we're going to say, all right, that's right. Sales price. You picked that one up in the correct spot. Good work. And then we have the income account. The income account being also lining up exactly. So income account, we see that one mapping out. That's good. And then we have the purchase description. Purchase description, we have that as one of our headers. That lines out. That looks right. Then I have the purchase cost. The purchase cost, we just put cost. And they're calling it purchase cost, but they were able to figure that out. So that looks good. They have that. And then we have the expense account. And the expense account, notice they couldn't line that up because what did we put it in as? I put it in as, I told you to put it in as cost of goods sold account. And it should be the expense account. So I'm going to say, all right, that one, they couldn't figure it out because we were so far off. So I'm going to say, but that's okay, because I can just say, these are my headers. I want you to put the cost of goods sold account right there. That's the cost of goods sold account. And then the same thing with the quantity on hand. Notice so now I've matched out the cost of goods sold. The quantity on hand, how many do we have on hand? We put in as QTY, shorthand, quantity on hand. They couldn't figure that out. They couldn't figure it out. I kind of feel like they should have been able to, but they couldn't do it. So they're going to call it quantity on hand. So I'm going to say, that's okay. We'll find it here. Quantity on hand. We just got to map that out to QTY on hand. And so I can go ahead and match that one up. We found the quantity on hand. So that looks good. And then we have the inventory assets account. So, and that I have the inventory asset that lines up perfectly. So we have the inventory assets account lines up. That looks good. Now they also have the quantity as of date. So that, to me, I put on here the quantity as of date, and they didn't pick it up. It doesn't look like. So quantity as of date. So couldn't figure that out. But let's see if I can see the header here. I'm going to say the quantity as of date. So that's going to be this one. So that one lines out. All right, that looks good. Now let's see what doesn't line up before we go forward. We got the product service name. Now the product and service name is basically going to be the same here as what we have, you would think, in our sales description. So what I'm going to do is put the same sales description, purchase description where we have the same name there. And I'm going to pull that over here. I'm going to say, all right, you could pull over the sales description to pick that field up. And then scrolling down, reorder point. We're not going to put a reorder point here. So that's going to be how low do we want the inventory to go before you're going to reorder the inventory. We don't have that, so we're going to leave that for now. And then if we check our sheet over here, and we're going to say, all right, is there anything on our sheet that's not in QuickBooks? And if I scroll over, I'm going to say, all right, we didn't take off the sales tax code. What about sales tax? Now, sales tax is going to be something that requires a couple different steps. We want to go into more detail basically on how to set up sales tax later, and then go back into our products and services to assign which ones are going to be subject to the sales tax. So we're going to go into that in a bit more depth later. Not set up at this point, therefore there's no input screen for it. So I'm going to say, all right, we'll deal with sales tax at a future point. That's okay. Let's go ahead and then say next. Let's see if we can push this forward. And here's going to be our information again. So now we're on the final step, the import step. You want to check the import step before you finalize the process. Now let's compare and contrast this to what we did with the service items. We have, for example, the sales all checked off because we sell these items. We also buy them because now we're talking about inventory items. We're going to track them because we want to track the inventory. So those three are on. If you want to make the name a bit larger, we're going to say, did it populate the name as we thought it should? I'm going to try to make this a bit larger, but it's really finicky, this thing. I'm going to try to, right there. I got it. All right, so there's going to be the name. That's what we would expect, right? So the name field populated as we would expect. The SKU populates as we expect. The type, so the type is going to be an inventory type. Notice that's the only option. Why? Because you would think it would be an inventory or the non-inventory or the service item. But because we checked off that we're going to buy and track them, that you only do that with the inventory item. So it has to be an inventory item if those two items are checked off. Then we have the sales description, which once again, you could make a little bit larger if you're able to do it, and it should match the name. So the sales description and name, we had the same thing. Then we had the sales price. The sales price, that's what we're actually going to sell them for. The income account. So then we have the income account. This is going to be the account on the income statement. The sales account that's going to be hit when we sell these inventory items. Make that one a bit larger if they will let me. So we have sales income. Now notice we would like it to be more descriptive because we were thinking about changing that name for the prior one to have service items versus sales of products and income. So these I would like to change now to be this income account to product. We're selling product, and then we can differentiate between the two accounts for service items and product items, which again, we could adjust the name up top. Now remember, you don't want to get too crazy on the different income accounts because service versus income, that's enough. you don't want to be breaking out every guitar, for example, as another income account, or every type of service as another income account typically. Why? Because your income statement will be too long, it'll be too much detail, and you can get that other detail, as we saw with the reports, by having other reports which will break out the sales by product, by service, rather than trying to put it all on the first page of the income statement. So you want to limit the number of income accounts. 2, services versus products, probably good then for most companies, for a lot of companies, and then you break out the more detail, the types of products you do, the types of services, not with different income accounts, but with the detailed reports that will support the income line items. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to change all these to sale product income. So let's see, I think I got them all there, sale product income. So there we have that. See if I can make this a little bit larger and just double check that we have. So there we have it, the sale of product income. Then we have the purchase description. I made that a little larger again, so I paused it so you don't have to see me go through the pain of doing it, but it's over here. It's going to be similar to the sales description. And then we have the purchase cost. What do we buy them for? We're buying them for a certain amount, and then we, of course, think that we're hoping that we sell them. We're going to sell them for more. So this is the cost, what we purchased them for. Then we have the expense account, which we put in cost of goods sold. I made that line item larger again. And they're saying, hey, it's red, so maybe we don't have an account called cost of goods sold specifically. If I select the drop down, they say, hey, we got this account called cost of goods sold, and it's a cost of goods sold type of account. I'm not sure why it couldn't line that up, but it couldn't. So we're going to say that that's the one we want. It's a cost of goods sold type of account. That's the one we want. I'm going to pick these up, cost of goods sold, all the way down, cost of goods sold, cost of goods sold, cost of goods sold, and cost of goods sold. Next, we have the quantity on hand, the QTY. So that looks good. Everything looks like it lines up there. And then we have the reorder point. So if we want to say, hey, tell me to reorder when I get, like, if I get down to 1 to reorder. And so it just depends on the type of industry you have. If you're talking about an industry where you always have some on hand, you may want to do that. If you're in an industry where basically you purchase them, you kind of customize them more often, then you may get the actual request before you order. So it depends on how you want to set that up. It'll give you a warning then if you put the reorder point here that you're getting low and you're going to have a reorder point. And then we have the inventory asset account. This is going to be the asset account that's going to increase when we make a purchase, like a purchase of the inventory. And then it's going to decrease when, of course, we sell it with the forms of the invoice and the sales receipts. So that's going to be the inventory asset. So it could either be going to inventory current asset, or we could be putting it to inventory other current asset. And I'm not sure why we would want 2 accounts at this point, 2 different inventory accounts, inventory other current asset and then inventory asset other current asset. So we may want to go into our chart of accounts and basically deactivate one of those if we don't want to use both of them, so we don't confuse the 2 inventory accounts and when we're populating our data. But we're going to keep the one that's defaulting right now, which is going to be inventory asset, other current asset account. Okay, so it looks like it's populated correctly. Note, again, we're on step 3. So when we import now, this is the final step of importing. So you want to basically go through this and double check it, make sure everything's lined up. If you don't, then you could go in and you can, if it gets messed up, you can go back in and delete those items if they imported it improperly or adjust them. But you want to double check at this point because, of course, this is the point that it'll actually populate if everything flows through as it should. So we're going to go ahead and say everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and import. So we'll select the import item on the bottom right. And then it said 6 of 6 has been imported. Now, before I leave this screen, I oftentimes, again, I want to keep the screen open possibly and see if I can open another window to see if it did what we thought it should. So I'm going to right click up top and I'm going to duplicate this screen before, going out of it or going too quickly. And then I'm going to go back down into our sales and see if those items have populated as we would expect them to. So then we're going to go back down, and we had like 7 last time, and now we have all of these, right? So they all look like they're in there. You can even go in and kind of double check these off. There should be an ELP or an Epiphone Les Paul, and then you can find the Epiphone Les Paul, and then the Epiphone Riviera. I won't go through the whole thing. But so now we have all of our items. They're both product and the service items. These are the items that would then populate on the invoice and the sales receipt, as we saw with the service items. If you wanted to import this one by one or edit them, you'll see a similar screen. If you then go to the edit of an inventory item, then we see the population screen up top. We have the name, we have the SKU, we have the category if we were to be using a category, quantity on hand 1, reorder point, we don't have one. Quantity on PO, and then we have the inventory asset account. That's going to be the inventory account that it's going to be populating on the balance sheet. We have the description, sales price. We have the income account that will be affected when we sell the inventory using an invoice or sales receipt. We have the purchase information, the cost, and then the cost of goods sold, the expense account, which will be affected when we make a sale with an invoice or a sales receipt. Let's check an invoice or a sales receipt. If we open a new tab over here, open new, and we go to invoice again. So let's take a look at an invoice and see if these then populate on the invoice. And you can imagine now if we were in a store or something like that, and you're at basically the cash register type of function, and someone was to come up. If you were at a cash register, you wouldn't use an invoice, but a sales receipt, but similar form. And then I'd scroll down and say, all right, well, I can see what you have there. It's going to be whatever product. If it's an Epiphone Riviera, we're just going to say, boom, Epiphone Riviera. And you'll notice it populates for us quantity 1. There's the rate. So what's this going to do? This is an invoice. It's going to increase accounts receivable by the 550. It's going to increase sales by the 550. We don't currently have sales tax. We're going to have to set up sales tax because that's not populating here. So we'll deal with that later. But also note that it's going to be decreasing inventory somehow, not by the 550, but the cost, which isn't on the invoice. But we know that it was on the information on this item that we set up, this inventory item. So it'll actually record that with the invoice, given the item that we set up, even though it's not on the invoice, because we don't want to give it to the client, and it will record the other side to cost of goods sold. So we won't record this now, but we just want to just note that, and then we'll record some of these items later, and you want to basically be able to see and understand what's going to be populated. Just realize how easy it is. Your goal is to make it as easy for anybody to populate this as possible without knowing how to set up this Epiphone, because you don't need someone else to really know how to do that, or knowing what the effect, all those accounts that are affected on the financial statement. But we need to know that to set up the service items and to be able to understand the 5 different accounts once we set up sales tax or so that will be affected when we have an invoice. So on the accounts later. So I'm going to close this back out, and I'm not going to record it. So we haven't actually recorded anything. We've just set up these service items to be ready to do so.